It was in Professor Katch's class that I met Zanita, the most fascinating and unusual girl I've ever met. The first time I entered Professor Katch's class, one looked around the room for an empty table to sit at and found 2 empty seats. On one of them were 3 beautifully bound volumes of Yusuf Ali's English translation and commentary of the Holy Quran. I sat down right there, burning with curiosity to find out who these volumes belonged to. Just before Rabbi Katch's class began, a tall, slender girl with a pale complexion framed by thick dark brown hair sat down next to me. Her appearance was so peculiar that I thought she was a foreign student from Turkey, Syria or some other Near Eastern country. Most of the other students were boys wearing the black hats of Orthodox Jews who wanted to become rabbis. We were the only girls in the class. As we were leaving the library that afternoon, she introduced herself to me. Born into an Orthodox Jewish family, her parents had migrated from Russia to America a few years before the October Revolution in 1917, fleeing persecution. I noticed that my new friend spoke English with the care of a foreigner. She confirmed these speculations, saying that since her family and friends only spoke Yiddish among themselves, she hadn't learned English until she started attending public school. She told me that her name was Zanita Lieberman, but recently, to try to Americanize herself, her parents had changed her name from Lieberman to Lane. Despite being thoroughly instructed in Hebrew by her father while growing up and also at school, she said she was now spending all her free time studying Arabic. However, without any warning, Zanita dropped out of the class and, although I continued to attend all the classes until the end of the course, Zanita never returned. Months passed and I had almost forgotten about Zanita when she suddenly called me and begged me to meet her at the Metropolitan Museum and go with her to a special exhibition of Arabic calligraphy and ancient manuscripts of the Quran. During our visit to the museum, Zanita told me how she had embraced Islam with 2 of her Palestinian friends as witnesses. I asked, "How did you decide to become a Muslim?" She then told me that she had left Professor Katch's class when she fell ill with a serious kidney infection. Her condition was so serious that her mother and father didn't expect her to survive. One afternoon while I was burning up with fever, I picked up my Holy Quran from the table next to my bed and started reading it, and, as I recited the verses, it touched me so deeply that I started crying, and I knew then that I would get well. As soon as I was strong enough to leave my bed, I called 2 of my Muslim friends and took the oath of the Shahada, or confession of faith. Zanita and I ate our meals in Syrian restaurants, where I acquired a taste for this delicious cuisine. When we had money to spend, we would order couscous, roast lamb with rice, or a bowl of delicious meatball soup swimming in a sauce accompanied by Arabic bread. And when we had little to spend, we would eat rice with lentils, Arab style, or the Egyptian national dish of fava beans with lots of garlic and onions called ful. While Professor Katch taught us, I compared in my mind what I had read in the Old Testament and the Talmud with what was taught in the Quran and Hadith. I found Judaism so flawed that I converted to Islam. Q. Were you afraid of not being accepted by Muslims? A. My growing sympathy for Islam and Islamic ideals infuriated the other Jews I knew, and they thought I had betrayed them in the worst possible way. They used to tell me that such a reputation could only be the result of shame at my ancestral heritage and intense hatred for my people. They warned me that even if I tried to become a Muslim, I would never be accepted. These fears proved to be totally unfounded, as I was never stigmatized by any Muslim because of my Jewish origin. As soon as I became a Muslim, I received an enthusiastic welcome from all Muslims as part of the group. I didn't embrace Islam out of hatred for my ancestral heritage or my people. I didn't want to reject, but to realize. For me, it meant the transition from a parochial faith to a dynamic and revolutionary faith. Q. Did your family object to your studying Islam? A. Although I had wanted to become a Muslim since 1954, my family managed to discourage me. I was warned that Islam would complicate my life because it is not part of the American landscape, like Judaism and Christianity. They said that Islam would alienate me from my family and isolate me from the community. At the time, my faith wasn't strong enough to stand up to these pressures. Partly as a result of this internal turmoil, I became so ill that I had to stop university before it was time to graduate. For the next 2 years I stayed at home under medical care, gradually getting worse. In desperation, from 1957 to 195 my parents confined me to public and private hospitals where I promised that if I recovered enough to be discharged, I would embrace Islam. After receiving permission to return home, I investigated every opportunity to meet Muslims in New York. I was lucky enough to meet some of the best men and women one could ever hope for. I also started writing articles for Islamic magazines. Q. What was the attitude of your parents and friends after you became a Muslim? A. When I embraced Islam, my parents, relatives and their friends considered me almost a fanatic, because I couldn't talk or think about anything else. For them, religion is a purely private matter that, at most, can be cultivated as an amateur hobby among other hobbies. But as soon as I read the Holy Quran, I knew that Islam was not a hobby,